everybody. Welcome to office hours. I'm waiting for Raquel Rose, our incoming superintendent. She's going to be joining us. I was just in a meeting with her about the safety plan for Kent School. There are many subcommittees in process going on right now. So get some updates on all of that as soon as everybody gets here. So we'll wait a few minutes for people to file in. You see Marianne's here. Hi, Marianne. Just going to wait a few minutes for my co-host to get here. She was at a previous meeting getting some water, I think. And Grant is here. Ellen. Well, everybody I see in the attendee list kind of knows what's going on with many of the subcommittees. So I think I'm still going to wait for Raquel to make her the co-panelist so that we can talk about the return to school committees together. You will be patient for a minute more. She was getting some water in between our meetings. There she is. Okay. Raquel, I'm coming to get you. And I think you can unmute yourself. Yep. Hi.
I can. Hi.
Hi. Welcome back. Thanks for
Hi.
over to this one quickly.
Yeah.
So I was previewing a little bit with the people who are in the who are attending. Many of whom are staff members and some of whom may have already been involved in some of the work that's been going on over the past week for the Return to School Committee. You were kind enough to share your slides last week outlining what the process is going to be for getting us ready to go back to school in the fall. And since then, I would just preview for people that there have been several committees meeting, one of which is a committee that is developing a survey to go out to parents to find out about the experience of distance learning over the past several weeks. Two other committees are dealing with safety considerations at each site. And the instruction committee continues to meet. Work is being done to procure EPE, and the wellness, mental health, social emotional wellness committee has met as well. And I think those are the committees. So I will, Raquel, why don't you give an overview, if you don't mind, of what's going on at the committees that you've been involved in, and I'll chime in, and I've been attending them as well.
Great. Liz, I have taken the slide deck from last week and just made some minor edits so that I could put it up for folks. So I'm going to go ahead, if I can, you can share the screen and I'll use that.
Make you a co-host, and then I think you can do everything.
Great. And here we are. Okay, so let's present. Okay, so as Liz mentioned, hi everybody, nice to see you. I don't know who was all on the line, but I am going to take just a brief moment before I get started because I do believe there, as Liz said, there are staff and there are very well parents out there, and I don't want to let the moment pass to not call out what's happening across our nation right now beyond COVID-19 related to the racial and social injustice issues that are coming to the forefront. So I've heard from parents in the Kentfield School District as well as beyond, as well as staff, and expressing their concern and their interest in what kind of action can we take. And so I just want to refer everybody back to this district strategic plan and the core beliefs around it, really believing in diversity as an asset and a promise for our community. The culture of bold thinking and really connecting to our community is so very vital. So, you know, as we go through this scenario that's in front of us right now, and our kids are asking questions, please take the time. I know I'm for sure doing that with my children. And so it's just really, really essential so that we ultimately can be the change for our young people. So I just wanted to take just a brief moment to mention that. That being said, I do recognize on the top of everybody's mind, or another item is really related to this pandemic. And so, as Liz mentioned, we are actively engaging in rethinking school in this COVID-19 environment, all under the guise of public health. And so I took last week's PowerPoint, if some got to see the presentation. I edited it, I kept the same frame, but edited it a bit to give a little more tangible outcomes of where we're at today. So as Liz mentioned, there is work that's been going on related to the committees, and I'll dive into that in a bit, but just again, going back to the what's known and what's unknown. And so what I shared last week was really this notion around the hybrid option. And so our instructional committee continues to meet. I'll speak a little bit about kind of from afar information that I'm receiving to share with you all. The reconfiguration of facilities, I'm excited to share that on Monday, June 10th, between 10 and 12, we're going to have the rapid response team from the county coming out and doing a walk of all of our sites, district sites, to help support us in terms of what things need to be in play to be sure that we have a safe environment for our students. And also, as Liz mentioned, securing the EPE, the essential protective equipment that staff will need, and really digging through what's essential to support the students. What's unknown is the vaccine and the testing. So I will say one thing that we got to hear earlier this week is that there is more testing that's happening across our county. And so we are seeing test positives coming up more. But what happened, I got to be tested today, actually, 2 o'clock, or well, it wasn't actually at 2 o'clock, but I got to engage in a testing here at the county office, where we are activating a pilot here to see about essential workers being tested. And there's discussion out there that it's a possibility that essential workers will need to be tested on a monthly basis, right? To continue to monitor and see those that are asymptomatic or those that have symptoms, whatever it might be. So just to note, that's kind of going on. Funding, we're continuing to get information from the state. Again, I'll just reiterate, $54 billion shortfall, $18 billion specifically for education, but we anticipate some support from our federal or state government. And so that's still being worked out. I believe we might hear something from the governor by June 15th. So just be listening for that. Staffing needs. So in the conversations we've been having is, one is trying to see where is our staff, well-being related to how they have all been shelter in place and teaching from home and doing all their jobs from home and are coming in and out of the space. But also as we go through our safety plan and thinking about what structures need to be in place, what is the staffing pattern that's going to need to be adjusted. And so that we'll have more conversation around that. And ultimately that goes to funding. Parents sending their kids to school, what will their kids need? And that goes to the survey. So got to be in a meeting this morning with some parents as well as staff to talk more about what the survey is going to look like. We're very close to having it ready. I'm not sure that we'll have it by tomorrow because I do want to have it translated. So we'll keep you posted, but it's very, very close to being done. We just need to do some formatting pieces. We got all the questions and I feel really great about that. Staff and student EPE. So this essential protective equipment. So we know staff are required, or anybody over 12, which would be our staff, obviously, essential workers, the adults, will need to be required to have the face covering. That is what public health is guiding right now. We're looking at, people have brought forward the idea around face shields, the idea of goggles that people might need for their eyes. So we're looking into all of that. But one big question that's coming up is related to kids. And do kids need face coverings? And so as I mentioned, I believe last week on the call, is that right now, if you look at the May 22nd guideline that came out related to summer camps, super clear that it's recommended if a kid is not active and they're over the age of 2 and they know how to put on the mask, that they should wear them. I'm sorry, not mask, excuse me, facial coverings. But just as things continue to unfold, I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes a requirement from our public health. And again, that most likely will be a local public health decision. So just to note and getting ready for that and thinking about if there's parents out there, how you're training your children on how to put on the masks and getting used to that. Cohort size, we're still at the 12-to-1, right? And that's 12 children and 1 adult. It could be more than 1 adult, but that adult has to stay with those 12 children. The adult doesn't count in the 12, right? So that's just where we're at. That's how we're planning as we're moving forward.
Raquel, there's a question about daily temperature taking of students. That is in the works, correct?
Yes, so we have secured already some touchless thermometers, and we're looking at other options that would be available. Also thinking about what's the most efficient and effective way to do the temperature checks. I'll be really honest, it has come up as a question from public health, mainly because if you're asymptomatic, you're not going to have a temperature, right? So it's definitely something that's right now on the checklist. Do you have a temperature over, I think it's 100.4. So yes, that is out there, and we are securing the essential equipment that we would need for that. Okay, I'm gonna move to the next slide. So as Liz mentioned, we have multidisciplinary subcommittees coming together. I apologize for the repeatedness of this, but I just think that it's important for those that weren't able to join last week or watch the recording. But the multidisciplinary team, so some have merged, right? We used to have an operations and a facilities. That's all come together with the site safety task force teams, which I'm going to go into in more depth today. Technology, mental wellness, instruction, and we have an overarching steering committee. I want to take us to our purpose. The whole purpose as we think and plan for the fall is really related to what our strategic plan has outlined for us, the physical and social emotional well-being of our students and our staff, right? So that they have this continuity of teaching and learning, continuing to acknowledge and name the elimination of the achievement gap, while providing a rich, high quality academic program, optimizing our financial and human resources, and really thinking boldly. This is a time where we have to be creative. We get to be creative because there's a lot out of our control. So whatever we have in our control, we really need to take hold of that and think about things differently. So site-specific task force. So today we had a meeting with both sites. As I mentioned, I'm really excited that we're going to have the walkthrough. Is it June 8th? Did I get my dates wrong? Yes, June 8th. I think I said June 10th earlier, so I apologize. June 8th between 10 and 12, we're going to be able to go through all 3 of our sites. So that will be Basich, Kent, as well as the district office. We've identified a team that will be participating, representing all of our stakeholders, classified, certificated, administrative, parent, that will get to engage in that walkthrough with the rapid response team from the county. The plan is to really kind of go through, hear the checklist from them, and try to mark things off as we get to move through these phase-in models of the safety plan. So what I'm going to dive into next is these 3 phases that we've identified. The work that we've done has really been with the site-specific safety task force teams, but we will be doing additional follow-up with all staff so that they're brought into the loop. And right now I'm bringing our community at large into the loop as well as we continue to refine. I want to note that the guidelines that we're working with, there's draft on that guideline. And the reason it's draft is because, as many of you are hearing, this is changing in real time. So we just have to be cognizant and be nimble enough to know that things are moving with us. And as I mentioned, a prime example is the face coverings. We know what we have right now, but that could change rather quickly. So we want to be ready for it. So site-specific safety task force phase 1. So that's right now what we're in. Originally I had it June, July, and really I'm feeling like it's more happening in this June timeframe. You'll see here the action steps. So these are the things. Last week we were asked, hey, do you have like time specific or time certain to what you're doing? So my time certain now is the month of June, right? And so those action steps would include purchasing and installing the EPE and additional protective infrastructure. So that's the signage that needs to happen, ordering the, those, as you go into the grocery stores and you see those plastic coverings that are, or guards that are between the cashier and the customer, those kinds of things, putting them into play. Prepare the school and district facilities for cohort setting and physical distancing. So in the conversation we just had with the Kent team is just talking about, okay, so can we do markings on the fields that would say, okay, this cohort, there's a circle, this cohort would sit in that circle. It's kind of like what you're seeing on the news, what's happening in San Francisco at some of their large parks, in a way to keep people physically distanced from each other, but they would have a space. So really trying to think about what can happen across the sites to help support that. Determine, train, and implement process for staff sign in and sign out. So each time I get to come into my office here in Terra Linda at the county office, I am required to sign in and sign out. The purpose behind that is really test, track, trace. So if there was a member of our team that tested positive, then we would want to go through who was in the building, who might have had contact with that person during the period of time. But just to note, and this is what I heard directly from public health, and Liz, please chime in if I'm getting this wrong in any way, is that the way in which you get exposed, if you are 6 feet, less than 6 feet for more than 10 minutes, right? Without the essential, so it's just important to note that. So if you think about when you go to the grocery store right now, yes, we're all putting on our face coverings and we're walking down the aisleways, and there's arrows that tell you go this way on this aisle and that way on that aisle. And so, but you pass people, right? Or you're right behind someone. Well, you've just mixed with like 10 different cohorts of 12. And so the idea is that you haven't done that for an extended period of time. So just to note, that's one thing that we're kind of monitoring, and just recognizing that it aligns with the test, track, trace. Communication plan for stakeholders. So as I mentioned, we're going to continue to do these office hours. I'm going to get a chance. I'm going to be inviting the staff to a webinar so they can go through what we're talking about with the task force, and just continue to give people updates as we have them. So, you know, just continue to join or watch the recordings if you're not able to join at 4. Phase 2. So this is June, July. And this is really looking at disbursement of the EPE for the district, all the district and site facilities, school and district facilities, being sure all that protective infrastructure is set up, refine our health and safety student protocols. So right now, I'll be really honest, we're really focusing on what is it that we need to be sure that the staff is all comfortable with and they understand the protocols that will be in place, so that once they're ready, then we can really say, okay, let's move ourselves into phase 2, where we're thinking about what is it that the students, that we need to do with the students, how do we train up the students and their parent or guardians about how they support their children in terms of coming back onto the sites. So that will really start to happen in phase 2. The communication and training for our stakeholders. So we're going to need to do a lot of training and reinforcement. To be really honest, what we're hearing from public health is one of the big deterrents for this illness is just washing your hands, right? It's just basic hygiene things. So just to note, but we'll have to reinforce some of those hygiene items that people need to be focused on. Also consider options for pilot programming and soft opening of services. So in talking just a little bit ago with some team members, is just thinking through, okay, if we come up with these plans and thinking about having kids on campus and they're going to run through drop-offs, maybe we need to do some pilots ourselves. Maybe we need to think about some soft openings. I will say, for the pop-ups that I got to be engaged in directly, we started with 9 kids, I want to say. We have 3 locations serving 48 kids and at each location. And so it was very slow to start. We were capped out as of late May, right before Memorial Day. And so we had a very soft opening, and then we just saw it grow over time. So that was good because we were able to iron out some kinks as we continued to grow. And then the next thing is really think about evaluating what student social emotional academic screening options we want to have. So I know the instruction committee is working on that. Our wellness committee is working on that as well. We'll get more updates from them. But just recognizing that we need to kind of get a good sense of where our kids are right now. How are they feeling about being in this shelter in place and not getting the social interactions? You know, many that belong to different kinds of clubs or public pools and such, you can't do that stuff right now. You know, some of our parks and beaches are starting to open up, but a lot of the access that our kids would be used to having, they're just not getting that. So really trying to think about what are some of those screening tools that we could utilize. Phase 3. So phase 3 is really July and August. So again, communicate and train stakeholders regarding all the site-specific practices and protocols. Implement a soft opening or pilot programming for services. I'm not guaranteeing that's what we're going to do for sure, but it's just really trying to think through, if we're able to get through these phases in a timely manner, we can, make that a reality. Implement some student social emotional and academic screening options. And then at the end, you know, August, I think I want to say late August, second to last week of August, Liz helped me out. It's in the 20s, is the first day of school and reopen operations. But it must be in alignment and approval with local public health guidelines. We really can't step outside of that. The moment we start moving outside of the public health guidelines will be when we compromise the safety and well-being of our students and staff. We just have to be cognizant of that. So I'm going to pause. I don't want to get distracted, but I do want to just note that I went through a lot right there. And if there's not a bunch of questions in the chat, I'll keep going, but there will be time. I don't know what time it is right now. There should be time at the end to answer more questions. So Liz, am I good to keep going?
Yeah, no chat questions. And school, first day of school is the 25th.
25th. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so instruction subcommittee. So I'll be honest, my energy right now is supporting around the safety and the survey committee more so. Our site administrators are really focusing on supporting and working with their staff on the instruction subcommittee. But some of the things I talked about last week was really around research, evaluate, and determine instructional options based on public health alignment, identifying some benchmark screening, and then contingency plans, right? So being able to ramp up or ramp down. But some questions came about, you know, what types of considerations are we thinking about as we contemplate the cohort models, right? Because as I mentioned before, it's 12 students to cohort. And so I'll just go through these right here, and then would happy to have Grant or Sally or Erica or Liz, I know you got to participate in one of the instruction committees, or even a staff member share a little bit. But some of the things that we're thinking about related to the cohorts and consideration planning is, you know, recognizing the logistics, right? So recognizing the logistics of the staff, of the facility confinements we have, siblings, childcare. Just, we know that those are going to be barriers and challenges for our families as well as our staff. So just know that that is in our minds as we're thinking through the cohorts. The notion of holding our students harmless. So, you know, when I was first kind of starting to grapple with what's it going to look like in the fall, oh goodness, we're going to have to do a lot of remediation. And my head has really switched a lot from that. It's not about remediation, it's really about acceleration. We have to hold our children harmless here. This was not their design. This was not brought about because of them. It's a situation that they had no control over. We had no control over it. So as they move into their next grade level, what are we doing to be sure that they have the foundation they need to be successful as they move along their progressions in their school programs? So just kind of noting that. Students with specialized services, so special education, 504 plans, English learners, you know, extended school year for special education. Right now, the plan is that will happen virtually. Our special education team is in communication with families about that. But, you know, what are we doing for those targeted populations, right? How are we thinking those through as we're thinking through the cohort model? So it definitely is front of mind and something that we acknowledge that we need to keep it, keep our eye on the ball there. The nimbleness of the contingency plan, right? So adjustments in real time. If there is a spike that happens in the fall, what do we have in place that we could easily kind of move ourselves into the next phase so that kids really don't, again, holding them harmless and they're able to maintain the continuity of learning. And then what can we learn from this experience, right? And I think that is a lot that we're pulling from the surveys, is trying to ask questions in a way that what has worked well, what are things that have helped kids that as a parent you've observed that has kept your kid very engaged in the learning process, and or, you know, feeling good about themselves and their social emotional well-being. So just some of the considerations. Grant or Sally, do you want to chime in anything there on the instruction subcommittee? Oh, Grant has his hand raised. Oh, maybe someone else does.
Hi, Liz. Hi, Raquel. And hello, everybody who's joining us here. You know, the work of the instruction subcommittee has really tried to focus in on what is most important in the area of teaching and learning, and trying to maximize each and every moment that we have with our children, both face-to-face instruction as well as digital instruction. And so the team has done a lot of work discussing a variety of instructional models, really looking at the importance of assessment the importance of continuity in any way, shape, or form that we can provide for our students during this time. So there's a variety of models that we're looking at. We're starting to coalesce around a model that looks like it has some potential to meet the restrictions that are in place while also meet some of our instructional goals. So I'm hopeful and excited to continue, working with our highly skilled educators to find a way to meet the needs of every one of our students. And we've made a lot of progress so far.
And can you hear me, Raquel, Liz?
Yeah. Hi, Sally.
Okay, hi, thank you. We too have been working in the same committee, the instructional committee that Grant is referring to, Base-Age Teachers. And I think we're recognizing now that we sort of have a foundation and we understand the boundaries and what we have to work with at this point in time, we're starting to peel off and develop our own, what our own daily program would look like. So lots more to do, but we're on our way. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Okay, and then I'll move to the last slide, or second to last, is the survey subcommittee. Again, I think that was touched on already. We have a number of folks on that, parents as well as staff, and we're just in the adjusting, finalizing phases of the parent guardian survey. We're also looking into other stakeholder surveys for staff, and I think teachers are checking in with kids and counselors as well. So trying to think about ways in which we can get feedback from all of our stakeholders so all voices are heard during this process to help inform our planning. And just thinking about that timeline. So you'll get more information. Please know it's on its way. Just those final touches that need to happen. So that's it. And I guess we're open now for questions. I'm going to stop share so I can see the chat and stuff, I think. Okay.
If anyone has a question, they can just do the raise hand and we will open your mic. Okay. Catherine Layton.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a second grader and sixth grader currently. And thank you for putting on this office hour today. It's been really helpful having some information. Can you speak a little bit more about the in-person? There was something on the first slide, I think, about the in-person instruction / home-based learning and what that might look like. Are we talking about like a half day of school, or I'm just curious to know if there's more detail.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So right now, based on public health, what we've been advised is that the cohorts can be no bigger than 12 cohorts of students, right, across the grade levels, and there can only be one adult with that group of 12 kids. You could have I don't know, you could have 3 adults per se, but those 3 adults would have to stay with that same group of 12. I would have to go to Grant and Sally about any kind of modified daily schedule in terms of hours, but the idea is that that first cohort would be together and they would stay together for 3 weeks, no less than 3 weeks, and then the cohort could switch and be a new cohort of kids for the next 3 weeks with that same teacher, because the teacher cannot go between those 2 cohorts in less than 3 weeks, if that makes sense. So
Yep.
That's the premise we're going from right now.
Okay. So there's no plan to have a shorter school day.
Again, that's stuff the instruction committee is working through right now. I don't know, Sally or Grant.
Yeah, my mic is still open, so I can go ahead and chime in and just say the length of the instructional day is something that we're taking a really close look at. There's some safety considerations that have to do with staggered start and release times to ensure that we're not having more students arrive at a time than is safe to supervise and ensure it stays in their stable cohort. But once you kind of get through some of those safety layers and then look at the needs of an instructional day, we're really trying to prioritize timing around getting the students what they need in the way of instruction and learning. So it's a little premature to say exactly what that school day will look like, but we're considering timing to ensure that we have enough time with students, as well as setting up for successful distance learning when they have to shift into the distance learning mode 3 weeks after they had been in-person instruction. So it is complicated, but as I had indicated, we have a foundation on which to build, and it started spurring some really great questions and considerations from the faculty about how to leverage what we do have to support our students.
Okay, great, thanks. My hope is that they will be in school as much of a full day as possible, especially for kids like my own who I think do better in person with distance learning. But it's also just a matter of, for parents who work, trying to figure out what the work day is going to look like too, and shifting that around school. So I understand we're all kind of taking it day by day. So it sounds like there'll be more to come.
Yeah, I think our interest is to have students at school as much as is feasible, given the support that our teachers need to plan and deliver meaningful instruction. But I think we're on the same page in wanting to have students on campus, with our teachers and with each other in a safe way.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sally, did you want to add to that?
I would simply say ditto. We're talking the same talk. So.
Yeah. There's a lot of conversation about the wisdom of an entire school day for younger kids in particular, in one room with one teacher, so but we don't know what the instructional minutes recommendation is going to be or the requirement from the state. So that could influence those decisions as well. What was I going to say? Oh, I know, Raquel. The pilot is not yet scheduled, correct? And it is at the earliest a phase 3 project, which is more like August.
Yeah. The phase 2 would be the planning for it. If we're able to, get people, see who raises their hand to be able to do that. And then I just because we would want to be sure we have secured all the EPE and the infrastructure in place. So for sure, early August.
Okay, great. We've got another parent, LaDawn. Your hand is raised.
As you pull that up, I do want to answer, Catherine has a question in the chat related to temperature checking. So right now, Catherine, just for you to have, yes, that is something that is listed around temperature checks. We have not determined exactly how that will look for the school and, where that will be, but it is something that's on the list that's been recommended through public health guidelines.
Okay, LaDawn.
Hi, thank you again for holding these office hours. My name's LaDawn Lafitte, and I have Mia, who is currently in kindergarten, and she's going to be in first grade. Question about, so you mentioned that the teachers could be rotating every 3 weeks. Is that also the same in elementary school, or is that more for the middle school children? That's my first question.
Yeah, so I would say, so the teachers not rotating, it's more the kids are rotating. So for example, me, Mrs. Rose, I have my 20 kids, right? Let's say 24 kids. I get 12 of those 24 kids for the first 3 weeks of September, let's say. And then they go into distance learning, and I would get my second set of 12 kids that would start the 4th week of September and would go into the first 2 weeks of October. So okay. I always have the same kids. So the kids would always have the same teacher, but they would, and they would stay in their stable cohort of classmates, but I could only see 12 of them at a time.
Okay, so I originally thought that maybe we were going to do a shortened week, and what I'd heard from other parents that was on the table was maybe doing Monday, Tuesdays, and then distant learning for the remainder of the week and another set of kids. So great to hear that. Also, I was wondering if there are children that, socialize with each other outside of school, families, or friends, whether they're in the same. Would you guys be open to considering that? Because if there are students that see each other, whether it's joint childcare that you have with another family, or if they are socializing outside, in order to minimize the risk of that cohort and the number of people that they are exposed to, is that something, I know it would be a logistical nightmare, but it would help keep the children safe because there's less exposure to less people and families along the way. Would you be open to that?
This question, not the exact same one, but similar about this is how are we creating those cohorts? And I guess philosophically, when we put classes together, let's pretend these cohorts aren't in play, and you typically put a class of 22 kids together, you're always wanting that class to be a heterogeneous class. And so that it's mixed grouping based on their social emotional and their academic. And you're going to get that information from their prior teacher and or, consultation with the parent. Kindergarten, it happens in different ways. But so I think, I'm not saying no that we wouldn't consider it, but I think that we want to be sure that we're having classes that are mixed abilities, right? So that we can really have a differentiated option within the setting. And does that align with their peer groups or those that are in their childcare programs? I'm not sure, right? So that's part of the big puzzle that we'll get to try to figure out the best we can. But I think there's a lot of factors that we're going to have to be thinking about as those cohorts begin to be developed.
And would parents be able to give suggestions into how cohorts are developed? Or is it the traditional way that you just described? Because I think that just looking at the world as it opens up, there are parents who are more conservative. There are parents who are less conservative. And I think, those are the things that in the parents that I've been speaking with, that's a main concern. And when going back to school is you are now bringing a whole group of people together who have very different beliefs on how you socialize, I guess, or what the risk exposure essentially is that you are going to put your child in and also yourself. So I think that was one of the questions that I just wanted to bring up, is that it would be great if the parents were able to have a say in determining those cohorts. And maybe for this year, we don't use the traditional method of doing it, but also being able to take into consideration their safety and how conservative every family is willing to be. Now, again, I know that just in Bay Cidre alone, there's 620 families, and it may not be completely feasible, but it would be great to have an input into it.
Yeah, the survey does ask the question about kind of what are some things that might be helpful for us to know, and that would be something that you could put in there. So we'll be taking that all into account as we begin to think through that more. Sally or Grant, do you want to chime in, or Liz?
I mean, I can chime in that we've already started discussions as a faculty about the design of cohorts and the makeup of these cohorts, and a lot of what Raquel just said have been a part of those discussions. With regard to the way that different families are responding to the restrictions that have been in place, that I'm not sure is a variable that would be able to be considered in the same way as some of the other balancing criteria that Raquel had indicated. And so while I understand and appreciate the concern, and as a parent, have some thoughts about my own kids, I think, part of the focus of our planning is about safety and keeping kids safe from any potential virus exposure, with a lot of protocols and practices in place at school. And it will ultimately be a parent's decision to make if it feels like every consideration has been applied. And I know that that's certainly our interest right now, to increase the confidence among our school communities. And I think with each of these sessions where we can share more and more about the planning, I'm hopeful that people will increase in confidence that school will be a safe place for our kids.
I would add as well, Ladan, that there are so many factors that we take into account, at least historically, and I think many of those will carry forward into building healthy, balanced classes in the fall for educational purposes. And then the safety, of course, is the new layer that we're all looking at. And we'll have to sort of wait to see how that plays out and the survey that Raquel's referring to, I think will help us all, take a look at it from through some different lenses.
There are some thank you, Lidon. There are some very specific questions in the chat about things like how would the stable cohorts of 12 for 3 weeks work with single subject classes at Kent? How would it be? Would there be more groups per teacher? Grant, are you prepared to talk about that yet, or do you want to take that a little bit later in June?
I think I'd like to just speak about it in very broad terms to say that a class of 12 students and 1 teacher for the full duration of the day in a secondary environment where typically single subject specialists are credentialed to teach their area of expertise raises a real question about how you deliver that instruction. And so right now we're just really looking at all tools at our disposal to connect students with content experts digitally while they are on campus. And there's a variety of tools to connect people digitally. Some we employ in school before the pandemic. And so we're really looking at leveraging everything that we've learned through distance learning, everything that we've learned prior to distance learning, to make sure that students have access to the people they need to have access to advance their learning. So I don't know that I'm prepared to get any more specific than that, other than accessing digital tools to ensure connection.
Okay. There's another question. Any thought of outdoor schooling and or working with the city to utilize vacant space to help alleviate homeschool? If I understand the question, I think it's about spacing. So it's a little bit like the question about, well, let me come at it from a different direction. Even if we were able, we have lots of open space, obviously, on our campuses. We are the open space in Kentfield and Greenbrae. There isn't really much else, maybe Niven Park. But, spacing people out and, we know now that outdoor activities with proper spacing are as safe as not being around people. At least that's what I'm hearing in Sonoma County. I think it's true that they're saying that in Marin as well. I think the issue is even if you had enough space to spread everybody out, you could set up little pop-ups or something out on the field. We don't have enough staff to put somebody, if we had all the students on campus, we don't have enough staff to assign to groups of 12 to teach those groups discreetly. So I don't know who's asking this question as a phone number, but am I getting to what your thought is at all? You can raise your hand and I can open up your mic if you'd like to elaborate. Oh, good. Here we go. Hi, 501436. Hi. Are you there? I think I opened you. Hang on. Oh, here we go. There we are. Hi.
There we go. Hey, sorry, this is Nick Romero. I am a father of a kindergartner and then rising into first grade. Yeah, you are getting at the question. I was just wondering if the constraining factor is really staff or space. Part of the rationale of the question is, I guess, the digitization on the homeschooling has been a challenge for us. And I just wonder, with the amount of open space and the temperate climate we have, if that's something that people would consider if we're kind of moving off of a cohort dynamic. But it sounds like that's more state driven. So the question might be relevant.
Yeah, it is a staffing, there are staffing constraints, and I know that we will be relying on our open space for being able to offer PE and brain breaks, just getting kids out because being in one room with one per teacher, not that our teachers aren't amazing and fabulous. I mean, it's just a bit of a, cabin fever kind of thing. But you're right, our climate would be ideal for something like that. And I think our open spaces will be highly utilized. But we can't have everybody on campus and double our staff to accommodate groups of 12. And then, of course, we'll have the rainiest year on record. So, it's just Murphy's Law.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions? I'm looking for hands. Lindsay Zerzan, I see you, and if you're holding your baby, you better put your hand up so we can put you on the screen and say hello to that person and you. Here's Katie. Katie, you have the mic.
Hi all. That's awful feedback. I don't know if you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
One thing to note, random, if you're dialed in, I typically dial into these, there's no way to raise your hand. So just FYI, you know what I mean? Like if I'm not on the Zoom URL. A question, but it's not related to COVID and that related impact, but more if there has been any talk as of late. Of course, everything emphasizes what's happening now in terms of race and race dynamics and everything else. So I'm just not sure, are we taking another look back at both if there's diversity on the teaching staff, any sort of diversity targets or ways in which we can increase diversity amongst the teaching staff, as well as just in terms of the curriculum and how we talk about race, how we talk about these things, and maybe just my ask is that we look over all of it just with a fresh set of eyes. I guess that's actually all for now. I'm sure I'll have lots more on the topic later, but okay.
Well, thank you for that. You know, we are at this point, as you know, in a budget situation that caused us to have to lay off teachers this year going into next year. So, you know, we have very few positions that we're actually replacing people who are leaving us, and always with an eye toward diversifying our staff. But in a small district where you're not bringing lots of people on.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah, it limits your pool, but not that that's not always a goal. And the other thing I would say is that, you know, with a week of school left, we don't want, I think, well, I'll just dial that back a little farther. We had a very active staff equity committee meeting over the course of this school year, having had 2 days of solid professional development at the start of the year from on courageous conversation from beyond diversity from the Pacific Educational Group. And the group was meeting monthly and was very, was in motion toward, I believe, I'm not overstating this, but to recommend a social justice framework to the district to implement. And then we were all dispersed to our homes. So as this group actually has put out a call to meet again now. Okay. And I think that will be the focus, and to take the time that we have just in the next week or so, and then in the beginning of the school year, and I'm sure people will be talking over the summer as well, to formulate a plan to bring a social justice framework to the district K-8 in a very developmentally appropriate manner. You know, I think that has a lot more to recommend it personally than to try to rush something in right now for the last week of school. Because sadly, as we know, these will be important issues in August as they are now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you. I have the, I can appreciate both of them are long-term as well. So I wasn't expecting anything too like short-term and reactive, but just in terms of long-term thinking. So yeah. Appreciate it, and welcome Raquel too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks,
Liz. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay. I'm looking, let's see. Okay, I will share that. There's there is a request that Grant wrote eloquently to the kids in Squawk Talk on Monday. It would be wonderful if he would be open to doing a live assembly with the kids. Okay, that suggestion has been transmitted. And I think we're handless, questionless. Anybody have a last thought on the panel? I've got Grant, Sally, you're still open, and Raquel? Thank you.
I think we're good.
Somebody asked, I understood you to say that you would be open to continuing office hours through the summer.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Oh, there's one new message. Please stand by. Oh, a thank you. Very nice. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week at office hours. And oh, by the way, there's a board meeting on Tuesday. It starts at 4:30. I'll be sending out a link. And the first 2 hours will be an honoring of our retirees, our Golden Bell recipients, our newly tenured staff, and those of us who are leaving the district and not retiring. So we would love for everybody to come along, and if you have something to say to the people who are leaving or who are being honored, you'll have a chance. The names will be published in the agenda, which will go out. It will be online or on the website as of tomorrow afternoon after 4:30. So lots of people to appreciate and say our goodbyes to, and it would be wonderful for as many people as possible to say those things to everyone. We'll be there all night, but we don't care. It'll be worth it. All right. Thank you. See you. Bye. Bye. Thanks,
Everyone.
Raquel.
Thanks.